Okay, so it's absolutely fabulous to see so many of you here today. Um, you're all very, very welcome. I'm delighted well, I'm Helen McVeigh, and I do my best to spread the love of Latin and ancient Greek as far as I can throughout the world. Um,
And
and
very effectively too.
thank you, Anthony. Thank you. We're here today to celebrate the publication of, I just lifted up, of this little beauty, the epic women of Homer by my dear friend Eirene Allen. So a little bit about Eirene. She has a PhD in creative writing from NYU. She is the director of the Institute for Classics Education, and this is a charity which provides assistance to school teachers in the US who want to teach classical literature. Eirene also teaches for the Classics Academy, and she has presented courses on the Iliad, the Odyssey, there's a theme here, ancient heroes and heroines, the translation of ancient Greek texts, and women in Greek mythology. So delighted to be able to join us all together to celebrate the publication of the book. I believe it is being published in the US on Monday, but I do know there are some people in the US that have already received copies, advanced copies. And in the UK, we've been buying it for about 6 weeks. It's been on sale. So the structure of today, I'm going to ask Eirene a few questions. She's going to read from the book, and she's also happy to answer your questions at the end. So if you have anything that you would like to ask Eirene, please do add it to the chat in the meantime. So first of all, I think I have muted everyone, just so there's no feedback or anything. First of all, I would like to ask you, Eirene, what was your goal in writing the book?
Um, right. So the first thing that I wanted to do was it came out of course, years of teaching the Iliad and Odyssey and reading the Iliad and Odyssey and researching it and talking about it. And something that seemed very manifest to me in all of these conversations is that we have a sort of two broad ways of looking at the women, looking at them through time, how their stories have been told across not only Greek, but also Roman, and also medieval and also modern, and then how they're talked about, how Homer presents them, how they're presented in Homeric language. And what I wanted to do was give a reading for us of what they were in the way that Homer presents them, which for me means looking at them in the context of oral poetics and how oral poetry has been studied and understood. And so the number one goal was, what does Homer tell us about these women? What do they say in their own voices in Homer? And because if we think about Homer as a tradition rather than a single author, then we will think, well, we can't really say Homer was a man who wrote a poem. We can say the name Homer is attached to a tradition of songs and that were transmitted orally. So there could be women's voices authoring, right? We don't really know. And I'm thinking specifically of the hymn to Demeter, which there is a theory that was composed by a woman. So we don't really know. And so that was what I wanted to do, was just show you who are these women in oral tradition, in the way we understand oral poetry.
Thank you very much. And now would you like to read the first piece that you've chosen, please?
Mhm. Yeah, so this is a section on Arete, and Arete is the wife of Alcinous, and I put her in the category of queens, figures of authority, um, feminine authority. So I'm just gonna read it. In the Odyssey, Odysseus's last stop before reaching Ithaca is the island of the Phaeacians, which is portrayed as a liminal space, an in-between place. It's neither the realm of the immortals nor fully integrated into the mortal world. Up to this point in Odysseus's journey, Athena has largely been advocating on his behalf out of scene. Though she will not reveal herself to him until he returns to Until he returns home, she does appear to him in the guise of a young woman to advise him, and he follows in her footsteps as she leads him to the dwelling place of Arete and her family. Its symmetry and abundance can be observed in both the heroes who dwell there and in the natural world they inhabit. Just as the Phaeacian men, this is from the epic, just as the Phaeacian men were skilled in all things to do with quick ships to drive across the sea, so were its women skilled with the loom, for Athena had given them knowledge of beautiful works and noble perceptions. Outside the yard, near the door, was a great orchard of 4 acres, and all around it a high wall was set. There, tall, luxuriant trees flourished, bearing beautiful pears and pomegranate and apples. Sweet fig trees and olive trees flourished, whose fruit neither perished nor failed to grow, neither in winter nor summer, from year to year, but always blowing zephyr made some grow and others ripen. Pear upon pear ripened, apple upon apple, grapes upon grapes, figs upon figs. This description of the Phaeacians' land evokes Hesiod's description in Works and Days of the Isle of the Blessed, where heroes dwell after their mortal deaths in the wars at Thebes and Troy. Then truly they were enfolded by the fulfillment of death, but for them, life and a place separate from mortals. Father Zeus, son of Cronus, settled them at the ends of the earth, and there they dwell, having a carefree consciousness, on the islands of the blessed, near deep eddying ocean. Blessed heroes, the honey-sweet fruit, the life-giving land brings forth, blooming 3 times a year. In this idealized land of the Phaeacians, Athena advises Odysseus he can secure his return if he can secure the approval of Arete, wife of Alcinous, and leader with him of the Phaeacians, whose name in Greek, Arete's name, means she who is prayed to. Athena recounts the genealogy of Arete at length. The first person you reach in the great rooms is the queen of the house. Arete is her given name in the family line, the same one that also brought into the world the king Alcinous. First, Nausithous was a son of the earth-shaker Poseidon, and Periboea gave birth to him, the best in form among women, the youngest daughter of great-hearted Eurymedon, who once ruled over the high-spirited giants. But he destroyed his people with his recklessness, and he destroyed himself. Poseidon mingled with Periboea, and she birthed a child, great-spirited Nausithous, who was lord over the Phaeacians. Nausithous brought into the world Alcinous and Rhexenor. Having no sons when Apollo of the silver bow struck him, recently married in the great room, leaving behind one girl only, Arete, and Alcinous made her his wife, and he honored her as no other woman is honored upon the earth, as many as now have a home under their husbands. In this way she was and is honored from the heart, by both her dear children and Alcinous himself, and by the people who look upon her as if she were a god. She receives their utterances when she walks through the city, for she's not lacking in a noble way of understanding, who possesses wise perception, and solves the quarrels of men. If she has kindly thoughts about you in her consciousness, then you may have hope to see your dear ones and to reach your high-roofed home and the land of your fathers. Athena's extended attention to Arete's origins reveal that her lineage traces back to the god Poseidon, establishing Arete not only as the leadership counterpart of her husband, but as a hero in her own right. She's descended from an immortal and regarded as if she were a god, as Hecuba describes Hector in Iliad Book 22. While Arete's ancestry confers status, she also possesses qualities that mark her as exceptional. According to Athena, Arete's nobility and wisdom have earned the trust of her husband and people who seek her counsel to resolve their conflicts. Athena portrays Arete as a stabilizing force who enables the Phaeacians to achieve and maintain harmonious balance. Odysseus heeds the disguised Athena's counsel and presents himself to Arete, who questions him in the traditional manner. She asks who he is and where he's from. Her third question, however, varies the formula slightly, as she has noticed that though he claims to be a stranger, he's wearing a familiar garment. And here's a quote. And speaking winged words, she addressed Odysseus. Guest friend, first I will ask you this. Who among men are you, and from where do you come? Who gave you this garment? Did you not say that you reached this place having wandered upon the sea? The garment Odysseus is wearing has captured Arete's attention because it was crafted by she herself and her women servants. Her daughter Nausicaa had given it to Odysseus earlier when she discovered him after he had washed ashore. In addition to highlighting Arte's wise perception, as Athena noted in her speech, Arte's recognition of the garment also conveys that woven cloth carries the signature of its maker and/or designer. Upon seeing Odysseus's clothing, Arete immediately perceives that he has had contact with someone in her household. His clothing carries her signature not because she has signed her name, but by the mark of her unique craft. Odysseus's response satisfies Arete, securing his journey home to Ithaca. Before sending him off, the Phaeacians treat him as a revered guest, observing the sacred laws of hospitality. In Book 8, Odysseus is bathed, offered food, and given valuable gifts, among them clothes. Arete came up to the stranger with a beautiful chest brought from an inner room. She set in it beautiful gifts, clothing, and gold, which the Phaeacians gave. She herself set out for him a cloak and a beautiful tunic, and speaking winged words, she addressed him, "Now see to this lid for yourself. Quickly whip a knot on it, so that no one may make mischief during your journey, when again you lie in honey-sweet sleep, going in our ink-dark ships." The land of the Phaeacians is Odysseus's final stop before arriving back in Ithaca, but it appears only in the narrative timeline, early in the narrative timeline of our Odyssey. Thus, a first-time modern reader may not yet know the nature of the trials Odysseus has faced on his long journey home, because he has not yet narrated them for the Phaeacians or for us. But for modern rereaders or ancient hearers well acquainted with Odysseus's trials and errors, Arte's advice to carefully secure the chest containing his gift so that no one may make mischief can seem pointed. It is a proactive measure that Odysseus himself did not take earlier in his journey. He failed to secure the bag of winds gifted to him by Aeolus to carry him and his companions back to Ithaca. With their home on the immediate horizon, while Odysseus slept, his curious and mistrustful companions released the winds too soon, resulting in his protracted journey and ultimately their own deaths. Implementing Arete's advice, Odysseus ties a cunning knot he learned from Circe, who he encountered after the incident with Aeolus's winds. If Odysseus had possessed Arete's advice and knowledge of Circe's knot, his journey could have been much shorter, but his Kleos also likely forfeit.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Eirene. Right, we'll keep going then. My next question to you is, how did you choose which women to include? And then, and did you have to leave anyone out that you wanted to include? And how did you choose which section to add them to? Because your book is divided into 4 sections: the queens, captives, heroes, and goddesses. So some of the women could be both, could be several. So off you go. What do
Yeah.
you
It's so difficult. And even as I read it, I think to myself of all the things I could have also said. And I just tried to console myself that which was what I kept having to do throughout the process, because I think there's always a question, do I go wide or do I go deep? And it's if one were to write, I'm not trying to say everything that can be said, right? That would be a really unrealistic goal and also unproductive. So, and a little bit arrogant, really, like what one person could say, all there is to say. Uh, so I made the decision to go wide because I wanted to show these women in this tapestry, and to sort of give us a moment of diving into their story and then pulling back. I think they tend to get lost when we think of the narrative as a whole, because we have certain expectations of narratives that make them, some of them, seem less important, but we're not seeing it again in the context of oral poetry, which anyone who is named could potentially have had her own local traditions. And by being woven into this big story, it allows people from all across the Greek world to tap into, to see how they're connected to this whole. So as far as choosing who to include, to my knowledge, included everyone who speaks. So if you had a speaking role, then I'm not, initially I was going to just go with everyone who is named. And I'm going to read a section that will explain why that was not my goal, but instead my goal was everyone who speaks. Just because I felt that giving everyone a moment to speak in their own voice, at least as Homer, as Homer gives it to us, as the tradition gives it to us, uh, felt important. So that was one goal. And then again, so difficult what category to put them in. And ultimately I decided what is the condition that shapes their narrative, that's the category I put them in. So for example, Euroclea could go in the heroes section, but because it's we know that she's a captive, she's enslaved to the household. I didn't want to, that's a very important part of her characterization, to use a modern term, but that's an important part of what she's doing in the epic. And so I decided to put her there. And I think the ones that are more surprising for readers are that Thetis and Helen are in the captive section. But again, like there's no, like Thetis's request of Zeus kind of hinges on my agency was taken from me for my marriage and for my son to have potentially to unseat you. Like you pushed me into something. I wasn't given a choice so that my son wouldn't be a threat. And this was for the stability of your reign. So the troubled nature of the request and Zeus being like, I really have to prioritize giving her honor, really hinges on the fact that she was sort of captured in this marriage. And she describes it in those terms as well when she's talking to Hephaestus. So I did feel like actually, out of respect for her, I felt she had to be placed in the captive section in order to really make us confront that difficult, both that she has power, but also that some aspect of her agency was taken from her. And then the same with Helen for me. Like the scene with Aphrodite in book 3 of the Iliad, we cannot ignore that she's very much treated like somebody who does not have agency. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, it's fascinating, particularly the story of Thetis. I had never thought of her in those terms before. So now thank you, Eirene. Now I'm going to ask you, you're going to read again for us,
Mhm.
and you're going to read from the section on one of the unnamed captives.
Right. And this is the section on the barley grinder, very short, but perhaps the most overlooked captive woman in Homer is the unnamed barley grinder, who appears in book 20 of the Odyssey. She is heard once on the day Penelope and Odysseus each wake up disoriented, having dreamt that the other was beside him and her. Ever mindful of the gods, Odysseus utters a prayer to Zeus asking for an omen. The god complies, sending a thunderbolt shooting down from Olympus. It is here the barley grinder enters the scene. She is one of 12 women responsible for grinding grain and the only one still at work, which enables her to witness the thunderbolt. She alone had not yet stopped. The most powerless one was still working, making the millstone stand, so she spoke a sign for her master. Father Zeus, you who rule gods and humans, you thundered loudly from the star-filled sky, though no clouds are anywhere, and you made this omen appear now for someone. Bring to pass the words that in my wretched state I would say. Let this be the very last day that the suitors take a lovely feast in the great room of Odysseus. The suitors have loosened my knees with heart-grieving toil, preparing barley for them. Now let them have their last meal. Notably, she's given neither a name nor a genealogy, two language features that attend heroes. She's described as the most powerless and the only one still laboring, yet she utters the crucial omen that reassures Odysseus of his future success. As with the masses of men who cannot all be named by the bard of the Iliad, the barley grinder's name is not recorded, but Homer does not allow us to forget that every mortal, from the humblest to the most exalted by mortals and immortals, is an essential thread woven into the cosmic fabric. And then the next section I was going to read is just one of my, I don't know, one of my personal favorites, but one that also I think that my students in particular have always been like, why is this story here? What does it add? So I will just add also by way of introduction that I do hope that because like I can't say, when you have a word count, you can't say everything that can be said, but hopefully you create enough opportunities for people to notice, for readers to notice things. And then that makes it exciting too. So, but anyway, here's the section on Ino. Ino's one brief appearance in the Odyssey can seem insignificant when the epic is examined through the lens of narrative cohesion. We might read past her seemingly decorative speech and scene, feeling that it has nothing to add to the story. If we approach her through the lens of thematic patterning, however, seeking to access what the epic suggests needs to be remembered about goddesses, the scene becomes vital. The daughter of Cadmus saw Odysseus then, Ino with the beautiful ankles, the luminous goddess, who before was mortal, speaking with a human voice, but now dwelling in the sea, she receives her portion of honor as a goddess of the sea. In her way, she felt pity for Odysseus, wandering and suffering. She ascended, looking like a gull rising from a lake, and sat upon his raft with its many fastenings, and spoke these words: Man of destiny, why has the earth-shaker Poseidon worked so fearfully against you that he has seated countless ills against you? Even so, he will not destroy you, though he desires to very greatly. Now, do exactly as I advise, for you do not seem to lack understanding. Strip off your clothes and let the wind bear the raft away. Leave it behind and strive to obtain your return, swimming with your hands to the land of the Phaeacians, where it is your portion to flee. Here now, stretch this veil across your chest. It is immortal. You need not fear either suffering or destruction. But when you land, but when your hands feel the land beneath them, loosen the veil and throw it back into the wine-dark sea, far from the land. Then yourself turn away. So having spoken, the goddess gave Odysseus her veil, and herself sank down beneath the waves, resembling a gull, and a dense, ink-dark wave covered her. Her entire story is compressed in the first 6 lines, which describe her noticing Odysseus battling Poseidon's storm and struggling to survive. In the first line, the daughter of Cadmus identifies her genealogy. Her father was the founder of Thebes and father of 4 daughters: Ino herself, Semele, mother of Dionysus, Agave, mother of Pentheus, and Autonoe, mother of Actaeon. The story of Agave and Pentheus, as portrayed in Euripides' Bacchae, is especially resonant in this scene. After Pentheus dishonors Dionysus, the god inflicts his mother, Agave, with Bacchic frenzy, and she dismembers her son, having mistaken him for a lion. When the madness passes, she and her surviving family members are consigned to exile and wandering. Other surviving ancient sources from classical Athens to the Roman Empire, spanning hundreds of years, offer variations and interpretations of these myths. In one version, Ino invoked Hera's ire by helping to raise Dionysus. Hera then hounded Ino into madness until she finally threw herself into the sea to escape. However the stories are told, in all 3 cases, a pattern unfolds. These women and the heroes they give birth to experience, quote unquote, wandering and suffering, what Ino observes Odysseus experiencing and which provokes her to pity him. The phrase, who before was mortal in the second line, picks up a thread of her story. As Ino threw herself into the sea, Zeus took pity on her and transformed her into a goddess. This iteration of her story follows the pattern of her nephew Dionysus. In one traditional version of his story, he too began his life as a hero and was transformed into a god. In a larger sense, Ino's story maps onto the pattern of heroes who began their lives as mortals and at the moment of their deaths are immortalized and subsequently honored in cult. In 2 lines, our bard offers a condensed narrative that speaks to the cult worship of gods and heroes without ever overtly referencing them. But for those who recognize the signs, these lines reinforce the meaning of heroes who must be remembered. Odysseus is initially wary of Ino's advice, since immortals are not always transparent about their intentions for mortals. In the Iliad, Hector presses forward, attacking the Achaeans because he believes that Zeus's favor is with him and he will be the savior of Troy. And he is not entirely wrong. Zeus does favor him, But Hector does not realize that his favor is temporary, part of a larger plan of Zeus within the Iliad to fulfill his promise to Thetis, and beyond it, to relieve Earth's burdens by eliminating the heroes who are exhausting her resources. When Hector stands firm to face Achilles, Athena appears in the guise of Hector's brother, deceiving him into believing that he is not facing Achilles alone. When the ruse is revealed, Hector understands that death has arrived for him and charges forward to attack Achilles. Since he must die, he will do so with valor. Whether Odysseus knows of specific occurrences of immortal deception is not as important as recognizing that he does not in the moment know the reason behind Ino's gift. He recognizes the limits of his knowledge and is cautious, attempting to survive by his own hands alone. When this proves impossible, he accepts the gifts, which can be said to represent accepting the cosmic plan, whatever it may be. In Hector's case, it resulted in his death. For Odysseus, it delivers him safely to the shores of Ithaca. Observing the pattern behind Ino's story illuminates its purpose and meaning. We now have an explanation for why this story is here and what it reminds historical hearers about what they need to remember. A goddess who had once been mortal and can relate to and empathize with the suffering of mortals may be inclined to use her power to benefit them. The purpose of Ino's presence in our Odyssey is not to add to the meaning, add to the narrative, but to reinforce its meaning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have one final question before we can hand it over and open the floor. Mythological retellings are very, very popular at the moment and have been for a number of years. How does the epic women of Homer complement contemporary fictional narratives about women in Greek mythology?
So one of the really wonderful things about the popularity of modern retellings is that it keeps us thinking about the ancient women and talking about them and thinking about what their stories can mean and how they apply and where they apply. And I think they also really speak to the importance of these myths across time, right? They continue to be compelling to us in our own time. So with my book, I'm kind of trying to offer more of a synchronic look. So looking at them in their own time and inside their own tradition so that we can then take the modern versions and the ancient versions and see, right, how no matter how far we come, right, we're still connecting to this thing that it actually can be very different from what we think it might be. And I talk a lot about how the work that women did was so vital and so important historically in that moment they were living through, while today we might not think of weaving as a essential skill that everyone needs to have, right? We can also look back and see that, but it did mean something different in that time. And so we can take elements that seem familiar and see maybe they're not what we thought they were, and then we can also see, oh, but there are things that we can still connect to. And so I think there's like a certain poetic beauty in that as well. And so I was sort of hoping to add to our understanding and expand kind of what they can mean.
Thank you so much, Eirene. Fabulous. Thank you for reading from the book. Thank you for answering my questions. If anyone has anything they would like to ask Eirene, please put it in the chat or shout out. But there is a question already in the chat from Anthony. Anthony says, is it not miraculous that in tales written by a man or men, so many women could be portrayed so diversely and sensitively?
Yes, surely. But I would also just suggest that inside the Greek text of Homer, we can see many poetic traditions being incorporated. So suggestions to lyrics, suggestions to well, certainly we have many laments, which was traditionally a form traditionally associated with women, although we have many men lamenting. So basically what I'm dancing around is I wouldn't assume that the Iliad is written by men. And in this place, I want to, it's very interesting because typically, like when we see the argument of how was the Odyssey and the how were the Odyssey and the Iliad put together, it's often broken down to, well, either you think it was an individual or you think it was a committee. And I think the oral poetic theory for me would be it's neither a committee nor a man, but a super secret third option, which is the community. So maybe there was an individual that compiled the traditions into this epic. Maybe there was a committee that compiled this massive tradition into the epics, but it's the community. And so, yeah, I don't know that I wouldn't assume that that it's just men who are writing, right? Or that's my, yeah. But that's my speculation. I'll call it uneducated speculation. But again, because, for example, with the Homeric hymns, we think, oh, they were the default is always he, whoever he was who wrote the hymn. And we don't really know. And we know of women's poetic traditions. We know of them, that they existed and that women were composing poetry, and also that women had their own festivals where presumably they would have been singing songs that they composed. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Cara, good to see you here, Cara. Cara asks, were you able to ascertain anything about the experience of older women in the Iliad or the Odyssey?
Hmm. Um, anything about the experience of older women? Oh, that is really interesting. I am thinking about Euryclea in this question. And I thinking of what your question is, like the first thing that I'm thinking of is the concept of the foster mother. And in other words, like it's not about whether you give birth to children, but maybe the role that you play in a community. And again, I think there's an element of feeling a little not I not how we would want to think of ourselves, but I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating, right? I'm always nervous about what people will have a sort of reaction against. But I think that there is this issue for me. Women in Homer are very much keeping the memory of unity, actually, of community, right? All being united, and that it is the women who are holding this memory. And so for older women, right, and Euryclea, who I'm thinking of as older, right, because she was the nurse of, right, she raised Odysseus and she raised Telemachus. What is really incredible to me, there's a moment, and again, it gets lost when you just are trying to think about the bigger narrative, but when you really focus on Euryclea, there's this very amazing moment where Penelope wants to send a message to Laertes. This has happened. Laertes, we need to inform Laertes and see if he can do something. And Euryclea says, like, don't bother with Laertes, right? I will tell you. And she really advises Penelope in these very important ways. And she scolds Telemachus once when he, seems to critique his mother. Um, so I think that would generally be my sense. And I will say that I'm taking this view also very much from being inside Greek culture, where elders are highly respected and important. So, um, to keep that in mind, that's very much like not a historic, I mean, not saying we can't find it, but I'm also just using my own sense of something very enduring in Greek culture, which is the importance of elders as advisors. I don't know. That was a very long explanation, Cara. I hope that I've somewhat answered your question. And then,
Next, we've got a question from Julia. Julia says, I was struck by your observation in the book that it would be a mistake to describe Homer's work as unsophisticated literature due to the use of formulas, since it is not literature. So I suppose that in doing this, would one be making a category error?
Um,
That's not really a question, is it?
no, I see the question. I'm just
Oh,
pondering it. Um, that is right. That's an observ yeah. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. Do you want to add anything on that, Julia? Because I mean, yeah, that's actually a very important thing that I'm trying to say in the book. So I'm really happy that you brought that
Yes.
up.
No, and
Oh,
the fact that you make it clear to us that it was a song.
yeah.
That's yeah, it's a revelation to me. Not to necessarily absorb it, to receive it as literature, but as you say, a tradition to which the name Homer has been attached.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a huge message.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I think sometimes I might underestimate how jarring that can be. But really, and I'll be very transparent here, like one of the things that drives me around the bend, to use a British phrase, is when people say, well, Virgil's much better than Homer. Like that makes me like go off into the
Ah,
atmosphere because it's not a comparison, right? Like
yeah,
we're not comparing them. This is not appropriate. So, and part of that is because in the writing down of this and the transmission of this, that's something that really sticks with me. When this arrives in Alexandria, nobody says, we should make this, we should change things from this. There's clearly, rather than doing that, rather we should make this more accessible to our modern ears, right? Our modern ears. They say we should figure out exactly which was the authoritative, what was actually Homeric. So, I don't know, just an observ again, I'm just sort of throwing out things that interest me.
yeah, it was fascinating. Thank you.
It's like,
thank you,
oh,
Julia.
thank you, Julia.
Um, and Susan Dacey, Susan, lovely to have you here. Susan asks, could you say something about the structure of the book, and did you consider any other ways of organizing the contents?
Oh goodness, yeah. I mean, one of the things, again, this is one of the questions I had was, all right, if I'm going to write about Homer's women, do I just go chronologically? And or or do I, yeah, that was one of them. Do I go thematically? What do I do? Like, how do I? And um, a million times as I was going through it, I was like, oh, this was a terrible mistake. Um, but I shouldn't have done it this way. But which is my nature to do that, I should say. So in a way, I'm just looking back at did I consider other ways? Yes. But I guess part of the reason that I ultimately did feel like these categories had a meaning is because one, you when you're a modern reader, the first time you pick up the Iliad, you're just kind of thrown into the story and you don't really know what's going on. We're starting, why are we in year 9 of this war? What's happening here? And the Odyssey also in a different way is messing with our sense of time because we start off with this invocation of the muses. Then we're going to talk about this man, but instead of talking about this man, we go to Ithaca, we go to the gods in council. And then when we're hearing Odysseus' story, it's all out of time. So one of the things that I just was thinking was, I'm going to have an appendix of the narratives. And then if you haven't read them in the epics in a long while, you'll have an easy reference to the characters. You'll have an easy reference to the narratives, right? You can go and just reread the narratives. Um, but actually, like, I feel that if you are a goddess or a hero, and that was another big dilemma. Do I use heroine, the feminine, the feminine form, or do I use hero? Ultimately, I decided to use hero because I did want people consciously to connect to the hero, the masculine hero. Um, Yeah, I mean, so I did think, well, this is the role that they play, and that's what I said I was going to do was talk about women's roles, and actually, the what are the goddesses' various roles? What are the heroines or heroes' various roles? What are the captives? Like, why are they so essential to this story? And especially the fact that Homer uses often in the Odyssey the Demoi, which is implies captured in war, and as the follow-up to a war epic that we've just read. So I hope that answers your question. Very, again, a very long and laborious answer, but
Thank you. Martin we've still got some questions in the chat, but Martin, you've raised your hands. Are you good? Hello, Martin. There we go. You're muted.
None of that. Internet's a bit unstable here, Helen, so you're breaking up even as you're speaking there.
Oh, no.
I had a question. You've spoken very clearly about your choice of subject matter, Eirene, and choice of structure. Did you make any conscious decisions about the prose style that you would use?
Oh, that is a really interesting question because I think I did actually take a very different approach to the body of the book and then the afterword. Where for me, I did try to keep it a kind of, I felt very, very influenced by reading Homer in Greek. So you might notice there's a lot of participles.
That was my thinking exactly.
What an observation.
I think the style it resonates. It
Is what?
resonates very beautifully with the subject matter, I have to say. It resonates beautifully with the subject matter. It's a fairly timeless style choice. And my attention was drawn to that. Not, this isn't a criticism, but suddenly in the middle of a page somewhere, the duffel bag appeared.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, where are we? What century are we in here?
Yeah, I really was playing with that, with style a lot. And I'm quite humbled that you noticed that. Thank you very much. That's really lovely feedback. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
There's a question. I think it was just a direct message to me, so it mightn't be in the public chat from Peter. Thanks for coming today, Peter. He asks, was Samuel Butler onto something, at least in part, in his book, The Authoress of the Odyssey?
I'm so embarrassed to say that I've had this book on my shelf. I don't even want to say how many years I've had it and I've not read it. But I do think okay. I've heard that it is not the most flattering, and I'm sure he's influenced by some of the more vexing Victorian attitudes about women, which I feel very shielded from in Greek culture, where we did not have un unindustrialized a period of industrialization. But I will say the idea that the Odyssey was composed by a woman, right? The idea that women's voices are speaking for themselves in Homer, to me, does not feel, yes, I feel like that is on the right track, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see, who is this? Is this Caroline? Caroline, is there a big contrast between the lifestyles of the goddesses and the mortal women? For example, Aphrodite driving a chariot and getting onto the battlefield. Would a regular woman at the time drive a chariot?
So I also really try to emphasize, not to say that there aren't Bronze Age elements in the epics, but I do make the point in my afterword that we have to maybe not think too historically about Homer, that Homer's all, like, from the perspective of the tradition, Homer is of all time and for all time. So I don't think my book is the one to answer. Like, I don't think I and my book are the one to answer that question, Caroline. And I say this with humility, not with not like that's not an important question, because I think what would women be doing in the Bronze Age, in the Classical Age, in the like how what were they doing is supremely important. But I just don't think I am the person to know the correct answer to that. So I hope that you will allow me to respectfully defer to those who have more of that knowledge.
Okay. Andy asks, is there anything you had to leave out that you now wish you could have included?
Boo-hoo. Yes, 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 yes. So much. I think I wish I would have had another maybe 10 or 20,000 words so that I could say more in each section, because I think there are connections that I try to just leave, like where I'm hoping that by seeing the scope that you'll be able to see the pattern. I mean, that's a leap of faith that I'm making. I think I would really like I would have loved to write many, many more pages about Penelope and Andromache. I think there's so much more to say about every single one of these women. But again, I do sort of hope that seeing them all in one space together and having them as a collective put in the foreground will enable readers then to go and kind of go back to the narrative and notice them with a fresh perspective. So yeah.
And Jonathan asks a question I wish I had thought of. Jonathan asks, what would you like readers to take away from the epic women of Homer when they turn the last page?
I mean, I hope that people will feel their nobility. I know that's not a very, popular word, but I do think that Homer is showing their power, their nobility, their dignity. And I hope that you'll feel that no matter what the circumstances these women found themselves in, which Homer, I don't think, um, which I think Homer it takes very seriously. It doesn't, right? I can't think in English for them right now what the word is, but um, Homer's always giving, I think, respect. And I hope that my book helps people see their agency and dignity. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
We have another question from Julia, which is great. I want to know the answer. Are there any specific things in Homeric studies that you hope might be discovered or clarified or revealed over the next few years?
Oh, that's such a good question. I really, I mean, I guess I would want to, what would I hope would be revealed? I hope that we get a lot more scholarship on the heroines inside Homer. That's what I hope. And I am very cautious because I think all right, Julia, I think you were in the class that I mentioned this. Whenever people talk about like, we can reconstruct this now, I always think of Pill Down Man, right? So even like everything I say, right, we have to remember that when we're reconstructing, or I think of Evans and the Palace of Knossos, right? Like what we have in our imagination. And, maybe I'm doing this as well. Like I'm not really excusing even myself. I'm saying this is a potential reading, right? But I do hope there's much more. So what we can reveal with certainty, I mean, we can't. But I do hope there's a lot more research on heroines specifically and connections between the cult heroine and the epic heroine. I think that's also really important because we are all haunted by M.I. Finley, like hero has no feminine gender in Homer. It's another thing that will send me into the stratosphere. So.
Next question from Mariana. Could you tell us a little about your experience translating the moments of characters like Andromache or Eurycleia, especially given that today there are so many discourses about the supposed silence of women in Homer?
Yeah. Right. I mean, and I think we have to recognize there's a difference between like marketing language, right, and what is actually what authors themselves are doing, so that we don't, right? Because the idea that that the women are silent in the ancient sources is something I would disagree with, just on a personal level, I think. So when I think about Andromache's voice in the Iliad, and I'm translating her voice, and I would say just as important too is translating Hector's responses to her, um, and Euryclea as well. Um, and then I just sort of take Andromache's voice in the Iliad and I think about Andromache's wedding in Sappho. And this is a woman telling that, right? It's a woman's work, the the wedding of Andromache and Hector. And I just think, what have we not, like, and this influenced me talking about Andromache, the section that I wrote on Andromache as well. What have we not been able to hear? And how have maybe, like, how are our translations where we're trying to kind of smooth things over, which is not a bad, like, this isn't a critique of that, because of course, and where poets are inspired to create new poems of Homer. And incidentally, Andy, if you're still here, I'm waiting. I don't want a Glaswegian Iliad. I want like an opera, a Glaswegian opera of the Iliad, because I know you've taken the music class. So now I'm like, have that expectation, just throwing that out there for you. But yeah, so I don't know, Mariana, I hope that that answers your question. But again, they're not silent, but they also haven't survived as well. So where we want to put the onus of responsibility. And I do think Homer is giving us, like, these are laments that she's singing, and that's a feminine poetic form. So how could women's voices not have participated in that? That's my just reasoning, shall we say. Yeah.
Alison says, I think that some of the passages are
Ex-
so beautifully written, there must have been a female influence.
Yes.
Yeah. Susan also has another question, couple of questions about this.
Okay.
What are you working on now? Topic of your next book. Martin also asks, do you have a title for the sequel?
Thank you both very, very much for the vote of confidence. I would like to do something with the cult heroines and their connection to, because in the Homer does not, I think, very, very elegantly avoids ever overtly um, referencing cult heroes, but right, but the cult hero is all over it. So that's something that I would love to explore more. And again, the word hero in its masculine form is used very few times. And I think almost always, but don't quote me on this. Maybe I shouldn't say this because it's being recorded, but I'm pretty sure it's always being used of a hero who's close to death. That's my memory. So I could be mistaken. Don't hold me to that. But anyway, that's what I hope will come next.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just checking to see if there's any new
Caroline.
questions in the chat. What were some new things you saw in Homer while researching the book from Kenneth?
Um, oh yes, right. Okay. Um, what were some new things? Wait, let me see. Where did it go? I was looking at it. Oh dear, where did the question go? Oh, what were some new things you saw in Homer while oh yeah, so many, so many. Yes, you do. You find new things every single time. That's one of the things that's so nerve-wracking about writing a book about Homer is you're like, I'm going to read this, 10 more times and I would have maybe said something more or different but that's okay, right? Because that's why and that's one of the reasons that I say, like, we can't have too many books about Homer. We can't have too many reimaginings of Homer. Like, they're all part of the story and they all bring us together, which is also the whole purpose of the tradition, is to bring us together and for a dialogue. So, right, we're all just contributing to the dialogue. But some new things I say, I mean, okay, fortunately, because I don't hold on to these things, I couldn't even name names. But I do remember once reading a very decontextualized quote from the Odyssey, basically as a epigraph on a book. And it's sort of the decontextualization was so extremely cut apart that you could no longer really figure out the context of the quote. And that's the kind of thing that I think I'm also trying to, so that what I'm trying to give a form to in this book is, like, when you just see a random quote from the Iliad or the Odyssey, or perhaps even more vexingly, a decontextualized quote from the film Troy that is attributed to Homer. Right. Again, no publicity for Homer is bad publicity, but you'll actually have a context, right? You'll have that larger, and that was ultimately, again, why the broad felt important to me. So I don't know, Kenneth, if that answers your question, but yeah, you're always going to find something new in Homer every single time. Yeah.
I think that's a repeat question. I think that is everything. It brings us nicely up to 6 o'clock. Is there anything else, Eirene, you would like to say that maybe you haven't had a chance to today?
I mean, I think I've probably exhausted everybody already with my discursive responses. So I'll just say thank you so much to everyone who came. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and hear and chat with me about this book that is so dear to my heart. And I don't know, I'm going to be at the Classical Association conference in Scotland. If anyone's going to be there, please come and say hello. And I will also be at the Belfast Summer School in July.
21st to the 25th of July.
Again, if you're in Belfast, oh yay! I'm so excited I'll get to meet you in person, Susan. Yeah, come and say hello, and come to Belfast and hang out with us. We're going to have a wonderful time.
Yeah. I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone for coming along and for your wonderful questions. And buy the book, and see you again soon. I'm sure either in a class or at book club tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. UK time. It's not GMT +1. Okay. That is everything. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Eirene for giving her time today.
Thank you.
I'm away to research how to write an opera now.